Also, your sentiment on Somalia acts as our segue now to our next discussion here on that particular development diplomacy mission, where we know that a team led by Interior CS Fred Matiang'i met with Somalia President Mohamed Farmajo following a week of tension between the two neighbors. This comes after President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Somalia counterpart Farmajo agreed to de-escalate the conflict. CS Matiang'i, via his official Twitter handle, said the team had been constituted by the president with the aim of ironing out the cross-border dispute.
Interior CS Fred Matiang'i, who has emerged as President Uhuru Kenyatta's trusted lieutenant, led a Kenyan delegation to Somalia, where they met with President Mohamed Farmajo. Matiang'i said the team, at the behest of the president, was in Somalia to iron out what he termed as persistent cross-border issues. This follows a phone call between the two heads of state who agreed to appoint a joint team to look into the sticky issues including border security. Early last week, residents of Mandera were forced to flee the town after Somalia allegedly brought its internal war to Kenya. Somalia accused Kenya of harboring a purported fugitive, Abdirashid Janan, who is a Jubaland minister. It is reported that the Monday attack was Somalia National Army's attempt to recapture the fugitive, but the Jubaland security forces retaliated. It was further reported that the Somali army had been camping at Bulahawa, a town neighboring Mandera, for the past month, planning a raid to capture the Jubaland minister, who has been hiding in a hotel in Mandera town since January. A week ago, 11 northeastern MPs traveled to Somalia in a bid, they say, to find a lasting solution to insecurity in the area. The government clarified that the meeting was unsanctioned, with Parliament saying the MP's visit was personal.
We met with only one person, and that is the President of the Federal Government of Somalia.
Kenya is currently embroiled in a maritime border dispute with Somalia. In the suit, Somalia is taking a claim on an oil-rich triangle in the Indian Ocean. The Internal Court of Justice postponed oral proceedings to 8th June 2020 after Kenya requested for a delay in the public hearing. Sharon Baranga, NTV.
Right, so questions are coming to the fore. Why was CS Matiang'i the one to actually go to Somalia? Why not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Maybe we could just put it squarely to a panelist. Ahmed Hashim, let's begin with you.
Well, Mr. Matiang'i is effectively the Prime Minister of the country now.
According to who?
According to me.
Thank you.
He is probably the most powerful man in government today and is the right-hand man of the president. And on special issues that very close to the heart of the president instinctively asked Mr. Matiang'i to go and do the job for him. Of course, everybody could, it's a glaring fact that this should have been the foreign minister's privilege to go to Mogadishu and to go to Addis Ababa. But probably the chutzpah or the punch that is needed from State House would not have been delivered well by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but you could tell Mr. Matiang'i is a bull from Kisii, and he's going to say what the president really wants to say to these people.
So what are you insinuating?
So,
that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does not really have the gravitas to actually hold such a diplomatic role?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that the president at times, and this is normal in government sometimes, the president can choose on someone whom he really considers to have his own personal trust, and he's got overwhelming a relationship that is bigger than all the other ministers. And I think the president has come to rely on Mr. Matiang'i to do some things for him. And this is a special case because I think that the issue between Kenya and Somalia, which is extremely sensitive, a personal message was being delivered by Mr. Matiang'i. About the other day on the show, I said that Kenya needs a special envoy to Somalia. This is really critical. Instead of going with Mr. Matiang'i or the foreign minister, we really need a special envoy who can deal with what is going on in Somalia. And what is really going on in Somalia, Debal, is just one thing. the president of Somalia and the president of Kenya have just not come to terms with each other, no matter how much they have talked. Because the president of Somalia wants the troops and the military of Kenya to leave Jubaland. And we in Kenya want to leave, but we're not going to leave on his terms, because our citizens here have paid the price for people coming from that place to make life miserable for us here. And this is why our armed forces went in there. So if Mr. Farmajo wants us to leave, he needs to guarantee the security of Somalia and prove to the government of Kenya that he has the security of this country in his hands, and he does not have it. The second thing about it is also we ought to hold accountable our fellow there in Jubaland, Mr. Madobe, because Mr. Madobe now also cannot become intransigent. He's the relationship between him and Mr. Farmajo now has gone to the dogs, if I could use that word. And that is in the direct interest of the national security of our country. Because if the relationships in the political relationships in Somalia are being shredded because of the conduct of President Farmajo, that is in our national security interest, because the Shabab are quite happy today to see the Somali armed forces fight in Mandera with the citizens, with Jubaland, fight inside our territory. But we also have made a very strategic error, Debal. Our strategic error is very simple. We're playing the clan game in Somalia. And I will tell the government of Kenya is that if you want to fail in Somalia, is take sides with one clan.
Thank you. Right. Peter Kagwanja.
Now, I mean, my views about what is happening in Somalia are public in many ways. I've written about them and I've spoken about them. And this is not what I would call a joke, because Kenya and Somalia are joined at the hip. Because we are the only country in the Horn which has what you would call all races of Africa, from Bantus to Kushites to Nilotes to Hamites. This is the only country which is the link, you know, between what you can call the classical Horn and the rest of East Africa. And therefore, a person who sits in Villa Somalia and thinks you are going to play ethnic politics, either within Somalia or within the region, is basically a threat to the security in this region. The problem I have specifically with Villa Somalia generally is about its priorities. The current priority for the region and for the world is defeating Al-Shabaab, because it's the common threat to all the countries in the region. Whether you're talking about Uganda, you're talking about Ethiopia, you're talking. So the moment you start doing anything else other than defeating Al-Shabaab, you have your priorities wrong. Second is the reinvention of a democracy, which means reselecting the ethnic divisions in Somalia based on one. You are thought that one community is more superior to others. We are talking about the Farmajo's group. I don't want to mention them here, otherwise I make people angry. The issue is that you are trying to build power around your ethnicity, and that is not helpful. Somalia needs unity. Second, you begin to undermine the very foundations of the peace that has brought Somalia this far. And therefore, you throw the country back into civil war. Well, I mean, it might sound an exaggeration, but it is not. Somalia is back to civil war. Look at Puntland. Go to Garmaduk. Go to now Jubaland. Look at the statements coming from Hargeisa, Somaliland. Somalia is very fractured. And instead of bringing these people together, you wage war against regional governments. Now, so that is the problem I have with this. And why do you do that? You want to be re-elected as a president in 2020, 2021. I think. Thank you. I think he needs to build on the gains made so far to bring Somalia back to the fold economically, because it's doing well. But instead of doing that, priorities are wrong.
Right. But I asked for the optics, maybe why the Ministry of Interior and not the Ministry, or Matiang'i for that matter. Is
it not obvious that Matiang'i is the senior most cabinet minister, and whatever you want to call it, and that the mission to Somalia required the topmost officer apart from the president? I think that's the point.
That's all right. Simple. Let's hear from Brigadier.
Thank you very much, Diba. Well, I fully agree that the CS for Interior and Coordination of Government Affairs has that responsibility, actually, to coordinate government, and therefore this time he is well placed to go and be the envoy in both Somalia and Mogadishu. Of course, one will say, why not foreign affairs? That is left to really the liberty of the president, I'll say at this time. But I want to mention also that Kenya finds herself in a very complex situation here. On one hand, we have full responsibility to ensure that our border is secure and that we can't run away from it. And that's the key prime responsibility of government. Then secondly, we know that our neighbor to the east is Somalia, but technically that area is controlled by Jubaland forces. And therefore what happens is much influenced by what Jubaland forces does in that area. While on the third hand, we have that responsibility to maintain good relations with the government. And therefore, Villa Somalia becomes very important for us. So this complex situation puts us in a very awkward situation. But at the end of the day, it's very important that the relations between the two countries are maintained as much as possible. A regional government is useful, but not to the level of a national government. We know very well that we had a very big hand in getting Madobe into Kismayo. We know that. And even after maintaining him there, we played a key role. At the same time, we know very well that we played a key role in ensuring there is peace and stability in Villa Somalia in terms of Farmajo and all that. So my point is that having helped Madobe come in there, we had one more role which we didn't do very well. It was to ensure that Madobe and Farmajo work together for the common good. Apparently, we put too much effort in Madobe and left Villa Somalia, so that, in fact, our neighbor, another neighbor, took advantage to build on that. And this is something that Kenya has in the past not done very well. We do very well in the peace process. Remember Machakos, Naivasha, and all that. Then when the fruits were ripe, we got them there, and then we left it for others. The same thing. The government of Somalia in the current period, or what is now the government, was built in Nairobi, and we took them there. Then when things were ripe and things were good, we left them. Others took advantage. So to me, our responsibility now really to go back, talk to Villa Somalia. They are good neighbors. We can't away from them. And in fact, we are the best neighbor and promising in terms of what you have done for them, the effort we have put in there. And I feel that this effort by the government, sending CS Matiang'i, was long overdue. We should build on that, both in terms of Mogadishu, Ethiopia, and ensure that the region is at peace.
Thank you. Ambassador Smacha.
The optics are very important because by Matiang'i going, it also signifies, even from the Kenyan point of view, the importance and the content of the mission. And of course, as the General said, Matiang'i coordinates government, is briefy, is Minister for Internal Affairs, and so even the receiving head of state, normally they get a brief on the person coming. It helps them to feel that the person they are talking to is really coming to talk on behalf. Don't forget, this happened after there was a phone call. It happened after we have had this farol with all these 11 MPs who went to Somalia. And it's also happening when we have these issues which are pending even in the International Court of Justice concerning the maritime. And so you want to cool the tempers. And in fact, this is what we said last week, that de-escalate these tempers and start talking. And I think this has come out very well through this visit. And I think we should congratulate the government, because in this forum we have been saying there is that gap that was still there to build bridges between us and Mogadishu. And let's take one lesson from here. In addition to what the General said, I think we should have done better in supporting Madabo and make sure that he's also in harmony with Villa Somalia. The fact that we supported him and Mogadishu is reading from a different text is a recipe for some disaster. And then when our boys are there, boys and girls are there, a second lesson that we should learn, this is something that at AU, at UN, we have always advised that if you are going to send peacekeeping troops to your neighbor, it can be very tricky. And indeed, we are in a very slippery ground. I think what the president has done is good, and let's maintain that order, because if you reach a situation like now, I saw the US is being asked, leave Iraq. Yeah. We don't want that situation. It would be terrible.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much. Professor Naomi Damba.
But let me say a few things. There are 3 points I'd like to make. But let me say a few things before I get to that. And my colleagues here have alluded to most of that. Somalia is a volatile nation, and Somalia is an existential threat to the Kenyan national security. Somalia is a country where we have joined at the hip. We cannot escape what's happening in Somalia, real or not real. In Somalia right now, Turkey has got in and got very involved. Training created the largest embassy in Somalia. The Gulf states are there. And there's some really rugged, colorful individuals that are in Somalia for their personal interests. They're from the US, they're from Europe, they're from everywhere. They're going to make this theater very, very volatile and on a continuous basis. And so there are three things that Kenya must focus on, and focus on very clearly. Now, before I say that, the use of Matiang'i is through time memorial. Every president has used every possible asset at their disposal. When it came to the Chinese-US relationship, Henry Kissinger was not the Secretary of State or one of the most senior.
He was.
Oh, yeah, he was Secretary of State when he first crossed over to China. But this was an asset and a trusted friend of the president. And therefore, the president has used Matiang'i on the same basis. Now, three things that must happen.
Can we take two, or can I mention three very briefly?
Very briefly.
Okay.
The president must keep an open dialogue with whoever becomes the president of Villa Somalia. It doesn't matter who. But that open dialogue is helpful, whether you disagree or you don't disagree. We must align our strategic interest with both Ethiopia and the US in this theater. Lastly, supporting Jubaland in one way or another. This zone is important, direct interest to Kenya. So whoever control it will have serious implication about our maritime dispute and all other dispute we have. So we must have a friend in that area. How we do it is not necessarily having our military within Somalia. We must cordon off and buffer our Kenya border, Somalia.
Right, thank you.